Have you ever noticed that the harder you grip sand, the more it slips through your fingers? Yet when you hold your hand open, the sand rests peacefully in your palm. What if I told you that your relationship with discipline works exactly the same way? And that the reason you keep failing isn't because you lack willpower, but because you're gripping too tightly to the wrong thing entirely. 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood something about human nature that modern self-help has completely missed. And once you see it, you'll never struggle with discipline the same way again. If this resonates with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. We dive deep into the psychology behind human behavior every week. Let me paint you a picture. It's Sunday night, and you're making promises to Monday morning you. This week will be different. You'll wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, eat perfectly, work without distraction, and go to bed early. You feel that familiar surge of determination, that intoxicating sense of control over your future self. But here's what happens next. And tell me if this sounds familiar. Monday morning arrives, and suddenly that 5 a.m. alarm feels like a personal attack. Your body rebels. Your mind creates elaborate justifications. Just this once, you tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow. And by Wednesday, you're not just back to your old patterns, you're worse than before, carrying the additional weight of shame and self-judgment. We've been told this is a willpower problem, that successful people simply have more self-control, more grit, more determination. But here's where it gets interesting. Psychological research reveals something that completely contradicts this narrative. Studies show that people who report having the most self-control actually use it the least. They're not constantly battling their impulses through sheer force of will. Instead, they've structured their lives in ways that minimize the need for willpower entirely. It's like they've discovered a secret that the rest of us are missing. But there's an even deeper truth here, one that Machiavelli understood intuitively. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." What if the real problem isn't that you lack discipline, but that you're trying to discipline the wrong person? Think about it. When you make those Sunday night promises, who exactly is making them? The motivated, inspired version of yourself. Let's call him your Sunday self. But who has to execute those promises? Monday self, Tuesday self, Wednesday self. And these aren't the same people. They have different energy levels, different priorities, different fears and desires. Your Sunday self is essentially a dictator trying to control future versions of yourself who haven't consented to the plan. And just like in politics, when you try to impose control without understanding the underlying dynamics, rebellion is inevitable. This is why conventional discipline fails. We're using an 18th century military model, command and control, force and punishment, to manage a 21st century psychological reality. It's like trying to run a modern democracy with the tools of a medieval monarchy. To understand why this happens, we need to go deeper into the architecture of the human psyche. Machiavelli was a master of understanding power dynamics, and the most complex power dynamic of all is the one happening inside your own mind. Your brain isn't a single unified entity making rational decisions. It's more like a parliament with different factions, each with their own agenda. Neuroscientist Daniel Kahneman described this as System 1 and System 2 thinking, but the reality is even more complex. You have what we might call your strategic self, the part that makes plans, sets goals, and envisions your ideal future. This is your Sunday self, and it operates primarily when you're calm, reflective, and not under pressure. But you also have your survival self, an ancient, powerful system designed to keep you alive through immediate pleasure-seeking and threat avoidance. Here's the crucial insight. Your survival self doesn't care about your long-term goals. Its job is to get you through the next 5 minutes as comfortably as possible. It's like having a security guard whose only instruction is avoid discomfort at all costs, working alongside a CEO whose job is build something meaningful over time. When your alarm goes off at 5 a.m., your strategic self isn't in charge anymore. Your survival self takes the wheel, and it has one priority: get back to comfort. It doesn't matter what promises were made yesterday. Yesterday doesn't exist in survival mode. Evolutionary psychology tells us why this system developed. For thousands of years, the humans who survived were those who could respond immediately to threats and opportunities. Long-term planning was a luxury that came after basic safety was secured. Your brain still operates on this ancient programming. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Research in behavioral psychology shows that the more you try to suppress a behavior or force yourself to do something against your natural inclination, the stronger the resistance becomes. It's called the ironic process theory. The very act of trying not to think about a white elephant makes the white elephant impossible to ignore. This explains why strict diets lead to binge eating, why vows of perfectionism create cycles of shame, and why forced motivation inevitably leads to burnout. You're not failing because you're weak. You're failing because you're fighting against fundamental laws of human psychology. Machiavelli understood this principle in politics. He wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." The same applies to self-discipline. Everyone can see the behavior, but few understand the internal experience driving it. Now we arrive at the counterintuitive insight that changes everything. What if your lack of discipline isn't a problem to be solved, but a signal to be understood? Think of discipline not as the ability to force yourself to do things, but as the capacity to align your actions with your deeper values without internal warfare. True discipline isn't about control, it's about harmony. Machiavelli wrote about this in terms of political power. He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. In other words, effective leadership starts with understanding reality as it is, not as we wish it were. Applied to personal discipline, this means starting with radical self-acceptance. Not acceptance as an excuse for inaction, but acceptance as the foundation for effective action. When you stop fighting against your nature and start working with it, something remarkable happens. The resistance disappears. Let me give you a practical example. Instead of trying to force yourself to wake up at 5 a.m. because that's what successful people do, you might ask, what is my natural energy pattern? When do I feel most creative, most focused, most alive? Then you design your schedule around these natural rhythms rather than against them. This isn't laziness, it's strategy. Machiavelli was obsessed with effectiveness over ideology. He didn't care about how things should work in theory. He cared about how they actually work in practice. The deeper truth is that sustainable discipline comes from self-knowledge, not self-improvement. It comes from understanding the ecosystem of your own psychology and then creating conditions where desired behaviors happen naturally. Consider this. A river doesn't discipline itself to flow downhill. It follows the path of least resistance while moving toward its destination. The discipline is in choosing the right destination and understanding the landscape, not in fighting gravity. This reframes everything. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who lacks discipline, you become someone who is learning to read the terrain of your own mind and design systems that work with your psychology, not against it. But there's an even deeper layer here. Sometimes what we call lack of discipline is actually our psyche's wisdom protecting us from goals that aren't truly ours. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to be disciplined about things you genuinely care about? The discipline emerges naturally because it's aligned with something deeper than surface-level motivation. Your resistance might not be weakness. It might be intelligence. It might be your unconscious mind's way of saying, this goal doesn't serve your authentic self, or this approach isn't sustainable, or you're trying to become someone else instead of becoming more yourself. So how do you actually apply this understanding? How do you move from fighting yourself to leading yourself? First, become a student of your own patterns. Machiavelli spent years studying successful and failed rulers, understanding what worked and what didn't. Apply that same analytical mindset to yourself. When do you naturally have energy? When do you feel resistant? What environments support your best behavior? What triggers your worst? Keep a simple log for 1 week, not to judge yourself, but to gather data. Notice when discipline feels effortless and when it feels impossible. Look for patterns. You're not trying to fix anything yet. You're just developing intelligence about your own system. Second, design for your actual self, not your ideal self. Your ideal self might thrive on a 5 a.m. routine, but your actual self might be a night owl. Your ideal self might love strict meal prep, but your actual self might need flexibility and variety. Stop trying to impose someone else's system on your unique psychology. Here's a practical framework. Instead of asking, what should I do? Ask, what wants to happen? This isn't passive. It's about finding the natural momentum in your life and learning to surf it rather than swim against it. Third, create what I call keystone environments. Situations where the behavior you want happens automatically. If you want to read more, don't rely on willpower to pick up a book. Instead, remove all screens from your bedroom and put books everywhere. Change the environment and the behavior changes without force. Fourth, embrace the power of micro-commitments. Instead of promising to exercise for an hour every day, commit to putting on your workout clothes. Instead of committing to write a novel, commit to opening your laptop and writing 1 sentence. The goal isn't the behavior itself, it's building trust with yourself through promises you can actually keep. This is crucial because every broken promise to yourself erodes your self-trust. Every kept promise, no matter how small, builds it. You're not just changing behavior, you're changing your relationship with your own word. Fifth, develop what Machiavelli would call strategic patience. He understood that lasting change happens slowly, through consistent small actions rather than dramatic gestures. The tortoise beats the hare not through superior speed, but through superior strategy. Finally, redefine success. Instead of measuring yourself by how perfectly you follow your plan, measure yourself by how quickly you return to your intended path after getting off it. Resilience, not perfection, is the true marker of discipline. The paradox is that the more you accept your human limitations, the more capable you become. The more you work with your psychology instead of against it, the more effortless discipline becomes. Here's what Machiavelli knew that modern self-help has forgotten. True power comes not from controlling circumstances, but from understanding them so deeply that you can dance with them. The same principle applies to personal discipline. You don't master yourself through force, you master yourself through understanding. You become disciplined not by defeating your nature, but by becoming so intimately familiar with it that you can work with its patterns instead of against them. This isn't about lowering your standards or settling for less. It's about being strategic instead of stubborn, intelligent instead of forceful, sustainable instead of dramatic. Your future self is not an enemy to be controlled or a problem to be solved. Your future self is a collaborator to be understood, a partner to be negotiated with, an ally to be cultivated. So here's my challenge to you. For the next week, stop trying to discipline yourself. Instead, try to understand yourself. Become curious about your patterns. Notice without judgment. Gather intelligence about your own psychology. And then ask yourself this question. If I truly understood how my mind works, if I truly accepted my nature while still honoring my values, what would discipline look like then? The answer might surprise you. It might not look like what you expected, but it will be yours. and it will be sustainable, and it will be the beginning of a completely different relationship with yourself. What patterns have you noticed in your own relationship with discipline? What happens when you try to force yourself versus when things flow naturally? I'd love to hear your insights in the comments below.